remember the first time I was aware enough to look at the label in my shirt and see that it was being made in Bangladesh or Indonesia or one of those places where children were working for less than $1 a day. And all of a sudden, something in me changed. I realized I was stuck in something, and I never bought a new shirt after that was made in any other place other than here. You know, we're all stuck. Everyone is stuck. We actually live in a tar baby world. There's no way to touch it without getting caught. But there's layers of stuckness, some of which we cannot do anything about. I mean, come on, systems within systems. We live in a consumer society, petrochemical, energy, pharmaceuticals, all the regulations over and over. And any response in that field of stuckness, well, those are justice issues. But there's this other place of stuckness, spiritual stuckness. And wow, that's where we're going today. Being spiritually stuck is not easy, and yet all of us hopefully experience some sign of being spiritually stuck. Mostly I say that because being spiritually stuck is a sign of awakening. You're waking up to something that you're stuck in. And there's the extremes of stuckness, addiction, alcoholism, addiction from work to food. Also, there's these elements of life that make our getting stuck so important to us. Letting go of the past. I know people who have such a lack of community, and it's all pseudo-community, that they literally lack any feedback on their faulty thinking. And it creates things like dogma, lies, and denial. And of course, there's the ego stuckness of what we want, what we're accomplishing, all that stuff. And there's the full spectrum from emotionally stuck to mentally stuck. And if we look at the great teachers, Jesus, if you don't see with the eyes of a child, you see what we're stuck in? We're stuck in our adulthood. We're stuck in the very systems of how we adjudicate justice. And that's what Jesus was addressing. Buddha, boy, did he lay out a stuckness, desire. He realized his stuckness so much, he left his whole family, his kids and everything, in the middle of the night. And then there's Lao Tzu, one of my favorites. He doesn't really address the stuckness as much as he does saying what it is we're trying to unstick ourselves to be. And that's, we're out of accord with this flow, this reality of life that is true and bubbling like an artesian well. And many of us, we live in the backlash of our lack of forgiveness of the past. And the past is huge, man. And we can bundle all of these stucknesses up, and we can associate them to fear. To fear. You see, fear is so important in our lives. But if we don't face it, if we don't somehow articulate it, it can own us. It can create in us something that is less than who we are. And there's so many ways to get unstuck. Therapy, learning to pay attention. I think that's a very hard one, but it's one that's, I'm hopefully working its way into our world. Some people call us woke. I say, well, what does that mean? You're sleeping? The working for justice, that whole systems thing. There's 12-step programs. And, of course, one of my favorites is humor. I think humor is so redemptive. So we're going to talk about stuckness today. I'll be honest, I go on Facebook, and so many people have these poor me posts, and they never go to therapy. They never ask for help. And it's interesting how we deal with our stuckness. Do we indulge it, or do we try to get unstuck and move to the next level, which means change? So I wanted to start out with one overriding thing, and that's don't beat yourself up, man. Get over that crap. We're on a journey here, and as crazy as it is, as painful as it is, lighten up. the journey's so heavy, we got to keep our hearts a little bit light in order to do this, man, or else it's going to beat us up so bad that we won't be able to take it. And I think that's important. So I just laid out a whole bunch. I just gave a shotgun blast of, of reference to this concept of being stuck. Marianne, I'll open with you. What say you when it comes to being spiritually stuck?
Well, if we look at life as this continually flowing process, and even our own lives, right? And we're going along, and sometimes we get stuck in something that is comfortable and something that we want to stay stuck in, and then it becomes habit, and then it becomes if we don't grow and things around us start to change, then it's hard for us to, that fear factor kicks in. We don't want to lose our comfort. And so there's that piece of it. And, you talked about how do you get out of this? Therapy is one way. Learning to pay attention is another way. But another thing is tragedy. Tragedy sometimes comes and knocks us right out of that stuckness because you can no longer see the world the way you used to see it. And I would prefer the other ways. And I mean, it would be much more, you can grow through positive and you can grow through negative. And so how do you tap into those positive ways to grow? And I think you listed quite a few of them. And so, I think, wanting to be a part of growth. So I think intention is very important here. Yeah, we have to intend rather than want to stay where we are. And change is hard. It really is.
Well, it's interesting. Every point on my opening statement I made except one, and I left it out by accident, and you just made it. That was very cool. That point is so many of us are so well insulated, we don't know that we're stuck. And we don't even want to know that we're stuck. So that's another sub-issue of the whole waking and awakening movement. Bob, what say you when it comes to being stuck?
Well, the two of you have really covered the whole waterfront there. And I think that one of the things that you passed on was the similarities between addiction and being stuck. And I think that we have a very simplistic view of addiction in this country, I guess in the world. You can be addicted to drugs, you can be addicted to alcohol, you can be addicted to whatever. Most people don't realize how powerful an addiction to an idea is. And when you're addicted to certain ideas, it causes this feedback loop that locks you in and prevents you from moving forward. And the idea of being more observant and being more open to humor, being more open to breaking out of one's normal, or at least what appears normal view of the world is very, very difficult because of that loop you're in. It's almost like there's blinders that keep you locked into certain ideas. And then if you move over and get to another idea that you move to, then suddenly you're addicted to that idea. And as you well know, I also identify with Lao Tzu so much in terms of the flow of life. And, the idea of water coming upon a rock and not just banging into the rock, but moving around it and going on to the next rock further down the stream and so forth. And I think that the idea of being stuck is something that we're going to have to almost accept. We're going to be stuck at various places in our lives. And if we're lucky and if we're open-minded enough and if we seek help and if we seek, our friends and acquaintances and new ideas, we can move onto the next area that we're going to get stuck in again. And we just got to realize that that's going to happen. But if we keep moving, then we're at least somewhat flowing with life.
As you were talking, Bob, I was thinking, the path is a muddy one, and we just hope we don't get stuck in quicksand, Take that kind of step. And I think that both of you bring out something, that there is this flow, and this is part of what I think Western civilization is grappling to somehow digest. And that's that, the whole concept in China of the Tao and change, that they're so important. I hope China listens to it. That this concept of how we try to put ourselves in accord, and when we realize we're not, we try to address why not, and that's the stuckness, and that leads to a change. And hopefully every point of change becomes healthier than the previous point of change. And that's what I think this whole gig is about. And I also think, and I want to tell our listeners, man, don't do this alone. You cannot do the trip alone. You can't pretend you're somebody you're not in a community and then go back into your little alcove and try to be who you are. It does not work that way. That's a whole form of stuckness that is self-defeating and blinding, because your ego is getting fed at one level that's inauthentic, and you're unable to authentically process what's going on. And I think that inability to process what's going on, we become so insulated and so lacking a language. And that's part of what this podcast has been about. How do we talk about this stuff? What's the language of it? How do we, we use psychology, we use bio languages, we're using computer metaphors all over the place, trying to get some sense of stability as we grow. And I think that maybe that's the piece, is you develop an inner tradition of facing your stuckness, so that there is this incremental, at least, system of change that's going on in your soul. And it's a system of change that you can recognize as becoming a different person. I just laid out, but I just babbled like hell right there. So.
Well, no, I was following right along with you.
I'm not sure I was following, so thank you.
The danger is that you constantly put roadblocks up to yourself, and you don't know you're doing that because of your humanness. Better than, I can't think of a better term. You get stuck, you move on, and you get stuck again, but you don't realize you're stuck. You're still thinking, oh, I'm really cool because I got past this last stuck place. And the whole idea of thinking yourself's really cool for getting past being stuck means you're stuck again. And it's so inherent in the way we're wired that we're trying to protect ourselves. We're constantly going back to our more primitive brains and our more primitive ways of looking at the world. That I think, again, what you were saying is you've got to be aware that of all the time you're going to be struggling, whether it's physical or mental or emotional. And you just got to be willing to say, okay, I know I'm going to get stuck again, but I'm going to move through that one too. And it's difficult.
Yeah, and I think you nailed something right there. It's that awareness of constantly checking in with yourself, and you can keep going along. And I'm not a neuroscientist, but I remember reading about neural pathways in the brain that get formed, and so those lines of thinking we get embedded in. And how do you step out of that? And I think, people around you can help you. I used to say about, especially grieving people, I work a lot with a lot of people that are deep in grief, and it's a very solitary journey, but you cannot do it alone. So there is a lot of stuff that you have to do within yourself, but you have to have a community. You have to have people around you, whether it's a therapist, whether it's friends, whether it's family, somebody to help you, to support you, because it is tough. It's hard to face some of these things, and you need to have that love. And I mean, going back to what we always talked about, love will help us, and it's available to us. And so we don't have to be afraid of it. We don't have to be afraid of change. And yet we have to bravely move through it.
And both of you bring something out that's really important in the journey, and that's differences. Our inability to accept differences creates within our community a group think that we all are on the, doing the same thing and having the same beliefs and all that. And that creates dogma and creates a stuckness of a whole different order. And I think that it's important for us to understand that, because right now, America is spiritually very sick. We have created these pockets of groupthink where differences are kept out. And we've learned from ecological and environmental understandings that it's one big superordinate happening. All the differences are important. There's got to be all those pieces so they can lean on each other, and no piece has to carry the big weight. It's an amazing system that we have emerged from. And when our way of thinking is very different than the way of the world, which is full of differences and diversity and things that are getting more complex and differentiating, and we're trying to find out what's healthy to let in and what's healthy to keep out. All of these things are important. And in our discussion, I'm seeing that this ability to embrace differences, not just out there, but in here. And that's something, Marianne, when you're talking, I kept thinking, man, we got to own all this stuff inside that is very different from what I think I am and who I think I am.
Well, yeah, and you had talked earlier about the soul crushingness of being out, and you go out and you pretend to be somebody that you're not, and then you come back and you try to deal with that. Because when you're out there dealing with all of these differences, and honestly, think people have gotten so hostile lately too, that even if, when somebody, and I've heard of people in meetings where they start to get political, and it gets so nasty and mean, and so people just back away and they don't say anything. And so silence becomes acquiescence almost, because you don't want to fight those battles in those settings. And so then, so how do you navigate that? How do you not let that crush your soul? How do you know the appropriate battle to fight, and I don't know. I might have gone off.
No, you didn't. As a matter of fact,
a little tangent here. Because,
I think you bring out something that's very important, and that's that this process has to be a dialectic. In other words, it has to be between me and you, me and somebody, me and the world. There has to be an exchange back and forth. It cannot be addressed by itself. When we cut ourselves off from the conversation itself because it's uncomfortable, I mean, that's a big part of what's driving America right now, is we don't want to address what's uncomfortable. And the best parts of Germany and Japan are because they addressed what was uncomfortable, which was an empire and a fascist regime. So how do we unstick ourselves? And, truth is a big piece of it. The battle for truth today is a battle for one of two things. We're battling against truth in order to keep ourselves in denial, pumped up by our dogmas, our whole universe of untruths, and we're shooting to wake up that we might reflect who the world and how the world really is, which is diverse, which is complexing, which is, differentiating. And we're doing the same thing. We can't stop that process, say we're happy right where we are, and set up camp. It doesn't work that way. The river keeps moving. There's nowhere to set up camp, if you will. And so our stuckness becomes a real process of dialectic and how we develop that and how we listen to those who are very different than us. And I'll be honest, I go to Fox News. I can't take it for long. But I try to read that stuff. I'm reading, I've said before, the history of Robert E. Lee, just because I was so deceived. I want to see how they did that to me. Over and over, we're trying to address our stuckness, environmentally, politically, communications and energy-wise.
Well, in my view, we can't all be scientists, but we can all look to the scientific method as a good guidebook in how to move away from stuckness. The idea behind the idealized scientific method is that there's never a final answer, and that whatever we think we know, we need to test against the world. We need to test it against other scientists' views, other people's views, and we have to be open to admitting when we're wrong so we can move to the next thing. And it's not just, in developing a
You froze up, Bob.
Yeah, Bob froze up. We got a frozen Bob. We want to say God bless technology and
vaccine or putting a rocket. Am I back?
Yeah, come on, go.
Well, I was just going to say that we don't have to be working on science, but we can have the idea, or we can.
Oh, Bob is freezing up again.
Look to science at the idea of how we should.
Well, yes. and I think what Bob is saying is that science is offering us a way of sorting it out in such a way that it renders a closer view of what is true and real.
You had talked earlier too, Bob, about being addicted to ideas, and I think that's where this scientific, always being willing to admit that you're wrong is huge, because you have to shift and change, but we don't want to change our lives. We don't want to do what's necessary, especially when it comes to the environment. We're so stuck in the way that we've done things for so long that it would be a big shift in how we're living if we're going to actually address things. And we have gotten it wrong several times. And so does that mean we stop trying? No, you have to keep going. You have to keep, and make it better.
Well, and the journey is moving in a direction. And we either move with it or we impede it. And to impede it is really those moments where we impede it. That's not only stuckness, those are dead moments. Those are places that do not have a yield in time, forward looking. And when I say yield in time, I mean keeping our grandchildren in mind. What does that do? What is that idea, that action? What does it really mean for them? Because that's who, we're borrowing this piece to give it to the next generation and the next. And we have woken up in our life to two things. One, an extreme comfort. I mean, we are all royalty in our own castles these days. I don't care how small your apartment, you are the royalty there. And two, we've learned about the systems that created that, and that how those systems themselves are not in accord with the world and the truth and what is reality. And those systems are now giving us feedback, and we're waking up to a whole new order of stuckness. And I'm saying that both spiritually and globally. And there's a lot of people who are scared shitless from this. And if you really want to know what the reaction formation of the Republican Party and this almost fascist backlash around the world to authoritarianism and nationalism, it's about fear and people being scared shitless. And they don't understand that the very action they are taking in their fear are literally undermining the very thing they want to be secure. And over, that is a great understanding of how staying stuck creates more darkness and more denial and more lies and more, I want to say prejudication, sleight of hand is what it is. This is a very, what is the old Chinese curse? May you be born in interesting times. Well, we have been born in interesting times, well insulated. And yet our insulation itself has become a source of stuckness. How do we share what is true and real? You see the nature of stuckness? We're stuck in our inability to talk about stuckness. And so on that note, I'm going to ask Bob, final comments on being stuck?
Well, I really resonated with what you said about not wasting time, that we've only got a little bit of time. We can't waste it because we need to pass on to our grandchildren and so forth. In my mind, I flashed with a metaphor of the old bucket brigade when there was a fire and you were passing the buckets of water along. And if you held on to that bucket and didn't pass it on, that fire wasn't going to get put out. You had to keep moving it. You had to keep taking these new ideas and passing them on. You have to keep moving through your time because it's essential to the larger bucket brigade of history that's going on.
Amen.
And just hopefully we don't drop the bucket as it's time for us to pass it.
Marianne, final comments on being stuck?
Yeah, let's not spill the bucket, right? So I think, we kind of touched on a little bit of the idea of security and how that can keep us stuck because we want to be secure. And we do need to have a level of a sense of security in order to be able to operate, right? Everything can't be always in chaos, but the security is an illusion. And I think once that we understand that, and I think we're all beginning to understand that globally, especially the pandemic, I think that brought that idea home that nobody is completely secure and safe, even in your own home, right? And so how does that take us out of, and I think being stuck is we're just scrambling and trying to create that, and that idea that I'm safe and I'm secure and nothing can change. And if things were just the way they used to be, then everything will be okay. And addressing that, and that is going to help us move from being stuck in this whole idea. But it's a process, and it's not easy, and you need good friends to get you through it. So.
And we're slowly developing a language of stuckness. And I think that's important for us. I think that's part of what this podcast is trying to ferret out. We're just three people, everyday people. We're not famous or great or any of that. We're just everyday people going, what the fuck? And I'm a Moody Blues freak. And there's a line from Tuesday Afternoon that goes, those gentle voices I hear explain it all in a sigh. We've gone a lot of places, the final fight, the stuckness, the untruths, but there's a place that really has driven me even to this podcast, and it's a high place. Many have called it bliss, elation. What is it? What is it really? We don't know, but there's a place where all of a sudden everything makes sense. dance. And there's no language that can touch it. There's no poem. There's nothing that can touch it. There's no piece of art that can touch it. And yet all art, I think, is striving to reflect it in some way. It's this place in us that is so high and so cool and is just makes us want more of it. Bliss. We hope you have a great week, and in all things, may the one be present in you.